Thank you so much for your insight. It's been fascinating. My question is, when the emissions trading scheme was sold to New Zealanders, it was on the basis that we needed it to fulfil our Kyoto obligation. The Kyoto obligations end at the end of next year, but there are lots of symptoms that this emissions trading scheme might continue on longer. How do we fight back?
There are two things about this. The first thing is to read your own legislation very carefully. I can't claim that I've done this, but I think you should, because if what I hear is true, and I stress I have not checked this personally, it's just a rumour I've heard, your legislation is framed very much as you suggest it is, on the basis that you are only doing this in fulfilment of your Kyoto obligations. It can therefore be argued that if there is no successor to the Kyoto Agreement, and that at the moment looks a pretty safe bet, because France and Russia and Japan and China and the United States have all said they are not going to play any further and not going to undertake any more obligations after the Kyoto period expires next year. Then if there is no successor to the Kyoto Agreement and there are no obligations surviving that agreement, then the legislative basis on which the ETS was brought into effect ceases to exist, and it will then be unlawful for your government to continue with it. And that may be the case under the existing legislation. However, if that is not the case, and I have misinterpreted what I've learned about the legislation, I stress I haven't read the legislation, so I can't back this up, but I would go and check if I were you and actually read it and see if it says something that might be interpreted that way. Then go to Michael Fisher, who is a barrister in Auckland, who is on our side, and get him to read the legislation for you. If you think it says something like what I said it says, he has a very ingenious mind, and he will help you to formulate a challenge to any attempt to extend the ETS beyond the obligation period of the Kyoto Protocol next year. And that will catch your government mightily by surprise. The other way to do it, if I'm wrong about that, and I may be, is that if the legislation is at least drafted in contemplation of compliance with the Kyoto Protocol, but is not drafted in such a way that if the protocol ends, it too must fall, then it is open to you to seek a decision of the government after the Kyoto Protocol has actually fallen on whether they intend, notwithstanding its fall, to persist with the ETS. If they say yes, you should then apply for judicial review of their administrative decision to continue the ETS in the absence of the stated reason why they were going to do it. And you may find that by then the court is sympathetic to the idea that this is a pointless imposition which is calculated to do untold damage, in particular to your farming industries, and the court may well strike down the legislation on the ground that it no longer serves the stated original purpose. It's worth a try. I can't tell you whether that would work. I'm no expert in your legislative system, except that it's broadly similar to our own. And the main point I want to make is that I think that you should fight this, just as the same way as I've been fighting this now, by picking off the really serious frauds in the IPCC science, the ones that are not just marginal but are the central conclusions of the IPCC, going after the fraudsters directly and getting the police to feel their collars. The point is, if you sit back and don't fight this, they will roll over you. They will continue it. And likewise, if you get mesmerized by the idea of measuring exactly how much CO2 your trees and plants are taking out of the atmosphere and how much methane your cows are putting back into it, and you get into that kind of playing, that sort of game, they will roll over you. But if you take the absolutist stance and you say, we have now heard from Monckton that there is arguably no scientific case for any of this, and there is definitely no economic case for doing it, and the peer-reviewed economic literature is near unanimous that there's no purpose in trying to stop global warming, it's far cheaper to let it happen and merely to adapt where you need to, then you just take that stance as a collective group of farmers and say, no, there is no economic case for this, we will not play, we are not going to enter into these games, we will oppose you and fight you at every step. Because given the way they're treating me, this shrill shrieking, this flagrant dishonesty and rudeness by the news media, the failure of the Greens to be willing to engage with me in debate, all of these point to one thing, which is that they know they've got this wrong now. They're running scared. They don't want people like you to hear what people like me have to say, because they know that whenever anybody has heard what I have to say, they're at least going to have quite a few questions in their minds about whether what they're being told by the governing class could possibly be right. So you must stand firm. You must not engage with him on the minutiae of methane and CO2 in farms. You must just say, none of this is necessary. Economically, it is suicide. It will damage our farms. It will not benefit the climate. Even if it were to benefit the climate, it would be cheaper to benefit the climate in other ways than to do this. And therefore, remain firmly and unanimously opposed to it, root and branch, and throw it out. And if you can't throw it out, then throw your government out and go on throwing them out until they learn never to do this to you again.